Hello everybody and welcome back to Army Painting Series 19. This is the third episode. We did our color test figure. Again, the change was to oils, and we've just worked with our object source lighting using the fluorescent oil paints. I'll show you those in just a second. Here we're going to go over a bunch of the different materials, but now we've got to get to the rest of the unit. Let's get our painted figs out of the way. And here's your fluorescent orange. Again, this is from Marion Street. Is it essential? Not necessarily. I have to say it's not necessarily something you gotta have. If you've got a decent, say, cadmium yellow, and if you've got some kind of bright magenta, or even a decent cadmium red, you can get something pretty close to this. I believe these guys don't ship to outside the US. That's basically the only reason I even bring this up. There are other ways around this, and I think I might just do specific videos on how to do the fluorescent stuff, but or do stuff that's like the fluorescent, just without the actual fluorescent paints. Now, as far as the rest of it goes, this is the set that I've been talking about for, well, gee, a long time. This is your set of 10 right here. And if I can, I'll throw the links to the Amazon in the description of the video for you. There's a difference between these, and we have talked about this. So these are your regular Winsor Newton artist paints here. So there is going to be, like I said, a difference between these and these. These are sort of considered a student grade. That's why 10 of these cost 28 bucks. And I think this one's more like $7 or $8 just by itself. And some of the colors can be, just a wee bit more, like this one, which costs more than this entire set. So that's why you just kind of add these things on, as opposed to go whole hog, and you don't even know what you may actually want. Now, here's another thing too, and I brought this up a bunch of times, but we'll bring it up here again. So in the US, this for me and for other people has been super easy to find on Amazon. It's Speedball right there, Mona Lisa brand, odorless paint thinner, high quality. It just should be not that hard to find in the US. If you're outside the US, basically, this is the first stuff I used. And this is obviously Migamo, a Spanish company. Well, easier to get in Europe than it is here. That's why I got this, because it was the closest thing I could find to this, but easily available for me and cheaper. In Europe, this would probably be cheaper for you, I'm going to say. People have been using the white spirits, and they are really not necessarily the same thing. That's why I bring this up. So again, for the people in the US, one thing's going to be easier to get than another. Now this cadmium green here, this is an actual cadmium right here. So that means it does have cadmium in it. It is not one of those, as we call them, faux cadmiums. And we'll just bring out this one right here because we are going to be using it. So this is cadmium pale hue. We brought this up in the last video. This is not an actual cadmium color. It is cadmium light. It's not like it. It's not going to be the same thing. And I have noticed a difference between the real cadmiums and these. So I would prefer these. Do you have to get them? These are expensive. These are definitely expensive. These obviously much cheaper. So I would say it's all of these things, no matter what, they're all based on your needs and your abilities to get things. You'll see a lot of these. This is that permanent green. This is part of that starter set. It's actually not a bad green color. I kind of use it a lot. This is olive green. It's another one of those regular oil paints, not terribly expensive, just like the Payne's Gray that I showed you earlier. This one more expensive, however. This is indigo. I really enjoy this. This is like a souped up version of Payne's Gray, basically. Obviously, we've got our cerulean blue, and we'll go over some of these as we just move along here. And we'll probably be adding maybe even a few more to the palette as we go along. Now we've got our makeup sponges, especially for this stage. It's going to be especially important. Look at this. We've got a whole bunch of these chopped up into smaller ones. Paper towels will certainly be important because remember, when we're cleaning the brushes, cleaning means this. not sticking them in a thing of white spirits or something like that. It's a whole different deal, whole different ball of wax there. Now, when you see this, this is just going to be my thinner. Maybe I should put a little bit of a label on this thing so that people know what this is and not thinking that I'm using water or something else. So one of the first things, what do we have to tackle? We have to, because we want to be able to paint this on the actual base itself, that's going to be important. What I'm going to do is do some of that pre-glazing on these while they're still loose, okay? And then we're just going to pop these guys on here. I really did enjoy the freehand on that. That was very fun. Unfortunately, she's going to be covering up pretty much most of it. That's how freehand goes. This one here, same thing. We are going to have to do all of our kind of pre-glazing with this thing separate, then glue her on. There's a couple that are stationary here, and some of them will be our Seraphim, some will be the Repentia, just because of the bases that we were using here. Some have the glowy things. This will have glowy thing. I kind of left this one completely. I didn't do any kind of base painting on that. I figured, well, this way you could see the entire thing happen here from start to finish. And this is something that happens many times. I have to get certain elements of the army caught up to speed, so to speak. Like this one will have to be caught up to this one, which will have to be caught up to ones like this one. So we actually have kind of 3 different stages here, and we're going to have to get these caught up. That's a sort of a common thing for me, actually. Now here's another one again that will require a whole bunch of our object source lighting on it. So what we will do is we'll get that paint out on the palette. We have our usual number 8 rounds as well. And this is really what we're going to be focusing on. There will be no kind of detail stuff going on here, certainly no freehand. It is going to be a lot of blocking in, an awful lot of setting stuff up for most likely for the episode 4. That's what a lot of this is going to be, setting it up for that. And even here, we're still going to have to finish off some of our object source lighting here because those even need to be a little bit darker. So what we will do is we'll get all our colors out on the palette, and we'll be back with that somewhat messy introductory glaze next. We begin now with probably the least elegant of all of the tasks pretty much on any painting series, and that's going to be getting all the pre-glaze on these figures. Now here's your palette. Remember, the palette is this. It's the same parchment paper that I use for my wet palette. However, underneath, instead of the chamois and water, we just got ourselves a piece of cardboard. You take your glue stick along like this. You can see some of the glue residue on here, but you see how it's all dried. Well, once you're done with your palette for the day or the week or whatever, you just peel it right off like that. You stick a new one on there, and you're all good to go. Palette taken care of. We got sponges at the ready. I did throw this down here because in this stage, you kind of are going to spatter some things. It's just, I have not found any other way around that. It just kind of happens. We grab ourselves, some sort of, I'm going to maybe use one that's got a little bit more wear and tear on it here. This is some of that olive green, and you can see how that gets thinned down. Yeah, it doesn't have to be super liquid. Because we're removing it, it could have a little bit more thickness to it, but we will. And again, this is our little container of thinner. And we are also going to add a little bit of our, see the indigo to that. Again, it doesn't have to be necessarily 99% thinner. It can vary. It's okay. But we will also vary this tone a little bit. How does it begin? It begins not terribly thrilling here. And I'm also thinking the other reason I put this towel down here is that you might get to see just how much potential spatter there can be with this, which is why you don't want, and hey, I tell you these things because I usually learn a hard lesson. And I'm thinking, well, maybe they wouldn't have to learn such a hard lesson if I told them that, you know what, you might, if you don't want your miniatures that are done or maybe are partially done to get spattered, keep them free of this area. And this is not an oil paint thing. This is an any paint thing. When I use the acrylics, the same thing happens. I mean, you got this watered down paint and you're applying it really quickly onto a miniature, it's going to spatter. So this is not some kind of, oh boy, maybe I don't want to use oils. It's the exact same thing happens when I do with the liner paints, those Reaper clear and liner paints. When I do this sort of pre-glaze, guess what? Same thing happens. Ironically enough, the oil spatter is easier to clean up because it does stay dry or stay wet for longer. So it's actually easier to clean up that spatter than it is to clean up the acrylic spatter. Acrylic spatter is mostly, well, not mostly, it's always dry before you even know it's happened. So something to keep in mind. You notice I didn't get a whole lot of it down here because, well, we're doing our object source lighting stuff there. So we will show the difference. It's more the greenish tint that has as opposed to, say, the fact that it's darker, lighter, whatever. I'll hit this seraphim now. I'm not necessarily going to do every single one of these because I'm thinking that would just be a wee bit repetitive. I just want to try and have a little bit of conversation. That thing about the spatter was definitely a conversation I wanted to have. Also wanted to have a conversation about it's one of the reasons why we're using kind of one-ish color here as far as this pre-glaze goes. It does sort of follow along chapter 1, verse 1, book 1, well, line 1 of the Book of Wapple is, if a color goes somewhere, it must go everywhere. And if you have this as that sort of unifying element everywhere, not necessarily a bad thing. Not necessarily the worst thing ever. And this does not have to be complete coverage. If there's an area or two of this that I miss, down in here, something like that, it's not the worst thing in the world. However, as we have seen, it can be kind of handy to be able to have some kind of color down there, just already, some kind of dark color in that recess. If you're painting this with her flight pack or whatever you want to call this jetpack not attached, a little different story. You can get back there easier, but one of the points of the oils is, and this would go with Space Marines, whatever, any kind of thing where you would normally potentially think about a subassembly routine, oils do help you work around, or at least avoid the absolute necessity of a subassembly or the convenience of, because, well, as we all know, subassemblies are not always the most convenient. And I'm seeing some spatter here already. You can see it on camera right now. Now there's another one that's attached. Yeah, there's a couple more that are attached. I'll do one more of these, and then we'll do one that is not attached, and then I'll do the rest of them, because it's, again, I just don't know how much value there would be for you in seeing this part of the process, because it's not going to change terribly much. I would prefer that you see more of the object source lighting, and we are doing this more of a single color as opposed to, this is a one-off thing. Who knows, some parts of it may almost be getting a reddish glaze, some parts might be getting more of a bluish glaze. These are getting much more of a unified single pre-glaze, much more so than is usual. That's why we do the color test figure. That's what I noticed on the color test figure, that I ended up just pretty much leaving that one color very similar to one color, because this way, or if the overarching tone is going to be green, well, that the one way to assure that the green gets in the gold, well, is to have green underneath it from the start, from the very get-go. And again, as I talk to and as I watch people now that I've been doing the Twitch thing, I don't get to do it very often or for very long, but when I see people using the oils, man, I saw this today, just an hour and a half before I'm filming this. Somebody had part of the miniature with their pre-glaze and the rest of it had nothing because, well, they're used to that acrylic approach of, well, we're just going to paint this one area and nothing else, and then we'll move on to another area. Well, as you know, I don't even do that with my acrylic stuff, and most definitely not going to do that with oil stuff. So again, the chopped up sponge proving to be helpful here. Sometimes, so I'll just do this, kind of get rid of some of that. Now let's just grab one here that's a little bit easier to deal with here. Now these three, I'm going to get them out of spatter range. Oh, there is another thing I could do potentially even, and that is to take this piece of cardboard and literally build like a little shield over here. And I used to do this because when this was with the acrylics, when I would do that pre-glaze stuff, I would literally build a little shield like this. Then everything behind this shield was it was a splash guard, for lack of a better term. That's what it was. So that's something that I have actually done for years. For years, probably even before I ever started filming videos. That's how far the blast shield goes. In fact, it definitely is, because I remember, yeah, the house was set up in an entirely different way. It was before, we're talking maybe pre-2010. I already had the blast shield out. So that is something that is, I don't know, a long standing tradition here in Wappleville. Another thing too is that the color back here is, well, it's going to be a dark green, right? For lack of a better term, it's just going to be dark green in a lot of these places. So this is why there's a little bit less of that transitioning of color one color to the next in this pre-glaze than what you would normally see. Let us do our little thing here. If you wanted to wear gloves, you can wear gloves. If you're asking why I used to do that, but it drove the camera nuts. And also, it's just been insanely hot here this summer. And it's hot enough in the winter. My hands sweat in the wintertime when it's 10 degrees outside wearing those gloves. So when it's 85 in the house and I'm wearing gloves, that's not going to work terribly well. Okay, so this one is all set. That one will be glued to its base. But the next thing, we got one more that's attached here. This seraphim here. Now, let's say we don't necessarily want to spatter up that little freehand that we did. We can do something like this. It's not touching it's just touching the sides here. I don't even care about this. It actually, heck, it probably would add to that. Here we are. This, like, again, you can see it is thin, but this is not as thin as it used to be. When I first started doing this, it was insanely thin down. But even when I was doing the acrylics, that got thicker and thicker. In some cases, I was almost using straight up liner paint and then just wiping it away with the sponges. So everything changes. If you see a difference between, well, wait a minute, I watched this series here from before and I'm watching this one now. Well, guess what? Even if I'm using oils again in series 20, it'll be different than this. A couple of reasons. Figures change, or the requirements. Let's say if I'm doing osteotic bone reapers next, let's say, and I'm using the trying to do the TMM, right? The non or the true metallic metal stuff, could be a whole different thing. Let's say if it's just standard, it's nothing different than just regular non-metallic metals. It could still be totally different. because the shape of the figure might be different enough. Everything changes from one series to the next. So I just, I usually have to tell this to people privately. I'm just hoping maybe that mentioning this and as many if I can remember it in every single video, I'll just mention it. We also want to remember that oil colors, each one is very different. If you've seen the one where I'm mixing paints or making, doing the making my own oil brushers, so to speak, which we're almost due for another one. I'm going to be putting in an order from Dick Blick, but just a few more colors, maybe 2 or 3 more, which would, I think, I've already got 5 or 6 colors. That's enough for just a really quick episode on basically making the oil paints or the oil brushers, or the Wapple oils as we call them. And that has less to do with the process of doing it, because the process of doing it is pretty darn simple. I mean, it is insanely easy. But the conversation about the colors that are being made and seeing just how much thinner it takes and all that, a different story. Very different story. So look at that. You can see that the greenish tint to that versus this one. Is it that much dark? Okay, it's darker, but definitely more of a greenish tint. So what we'll do is we've got, I think, 5 more of these to do with this. You've got a pretty good idea of how this works. We are doing the exact same thing on the other 5 or whatever it is, and then we'll get them glued down, and we'll be back with our mostly the object source lighting, getting kind of caught up with that and making all of these things be at the same stage. So we'll get to that next. Now we mentioned getting things caught up here, especially with the object source lighting. And it's not just stuff on the base. There's also up here, we got some flamey things going on that we're going to have to generate a little OSL this way too. Now again, these are all glued. They're all attached now. And the first thing we are going to do is we are going to dive into some of that object source lighting. This fluorescent orange, all the fluorescent oranges or fluorescent paints just period work differently than the regular paints. This one's no exception. In many ways, it's kind of like the old, gosh, I do have some. And some of it's more like the old Vallejo fluorescents where they're thick but extremely transparent. Whereas the golden, these were really thin, but they actually, I don't know, they had almost as much coverage, if not more, than, say, the acrylic or the Vallejo version. That is why we have a few other colors sitting out here. And it's going to grab me another brush here. So we have ourselves, now this is the faux cadmium yellow light. This is a faux cadmium yellow medium. There's your fluorescent. This over here, that's the real deal. That is cadmium scarlet. That's kind of like a cadmium orange. And then this is the cadmium red deep, which again is, so you got faux, real. And again, that real one, I mean, this thing weighs a ton. It's got the same amount of paint in it, but you can feel the heavy metals in there. So if you don't want to have that kind of stuff, you don't have to use those colors. You can use these that say the hue. Are they ideal? Are they the perfect thing? Maybe not. But for what you're doing, you know what? I think I'm not sure you really need to get a $23 to $40 tube of paint. I think for some of you guys, actually most of you guys, there's just no point. There's really no point in doing that. Now, what do we say about starting things as dry as possible in that last video? And again, this is an emphasis. This is a strong point of emphasis here. Look at this. Now, I'm not necessarily just going to wipe this on my hand because it's got the actual cadmium in there. But you can see this is a very dry application here. And I might even just, I'm actually going to use another brush that's even a little bit softer than this one. Yeah, that one must have some leftover whatever, I think, acrylic paint. And this is another discussion we're going to have, because these are things that I think I notice more now as I get to see other people doing stuff. And you'll just look at, is this not very similar to what we do normally? Right? Is it that much different than acrylics, or is it that much different than any other oil color? This is kind of, it's kind of neat that this is actually blending into that pre-glaze. Look at this. This is going to be one fiery sister, I'm telling you. Look at all the fun things we're going to get to do on this. I mean, she's just ablaze. She's radiant. I mean, there's just lighting coming from everywhere. This is going to be a blast. Okay. Now this does have, again, just a touch of that cadmium orange. You notice that we don't actually have the fluorescent in here yet. What I've noticed is that it sort of needs the support of these other colors. And that's not unusual. That is really not out of the ordinary for any kind of fluorescent paint. Especially colors like, say, the fluorescent blue. That really needs to be combined with other colors for it to be effective. It really does. So that is, maybe for you guys, that's a new thought or a new concept or a new idea. For me, I'm kind of, yeah, used to it, very used to it. We'll get some of our optic source lighting there too. It's always establish the effect, right? Get into it as soon as you can, because look at how much we're not going to have to paint with all the greens and the golds and the everything else, because we did this. It has saved us so much time already in just things we're not gonna waste time painting. They'll just get covered up anyways. So we'll set her aside, and I'm going to, first thing I'm going to do is eliminate any that don't have object source lighting, which looks like, wow, there's way more that have this than I thought. Again, look at how, I mean, this is insanely dry compared to what you would do with acrylics, and yet because we have that pre-glaze on, look how it's mixing. Look at how that is mixing together. This is how you get, just not have that hair sitting there. But I think you could hear that sound. At least I hope you could hear that sound of the, I gotta think what's being blocked by the base itself. We need to get the underside of her bolter here. A lot of underlighting on this. A lot of underlighting. Is it going to reach all the way back? Maybe. And I think that's about it. I don't think it would reach your face, because I think your arm and all this other stuff would just sort of block that. So that's another one good to go. This one, oh my goodness, has two different light sources. Another thing too to keep in mind, that with oils in general, and this is not always the case with oils, working, say, dark to light, it's more common with the oils. It's not necessary. It's not a bad idea. It's, I guess, as a, oh, what would you say, kind of a starting assumption. Just kind of assume that working dark to light, not a bad idea. Although we've seen we can glaze. We can do a lot of that stuff with the oils. So many things that you can do with acrylics, you can do with oils. You may need to take a different approach, maybe slightly different mindset, but it can. Look at this. This is just like, to me, it's easier in some ways to do that. Now, here is one area where I am going to just introduce a touch of my fluorescent here, because we wanted to go over these and add a little bit of dark on these, it gets to be too much, I can go back in with the fluorescent. See? See what that's already doing there. Look at the effect it's had on those skulls. Just a couple of quick, very dusty brushstrokes. And the entire segment here, this is going to be all about establishing this glow. This pretty much sets up the whole next, what, 2, 3 episodes, right? So, yeah. Now here again, gotta get caught up. Now this one, it's a little wacky because, well, we switched mediums in mid that. In some ways, it was intentional. I have to say, I would be lying if I didn't say, I can do something evil to these guys and just completely switch this whole thing around. Which is, hey, that happens to me all the time. It's a very common thing for me to deal with. So I thought that could be useful for some of you. Let's say you're doing the commission painting thing, and all of a sudden they say, well, no, I need this. And if anything, you've gotten your brain set on one course of action, and now you've got to reroute all of that. Well, hopefully this is helpful. So again, that's all of that stuff. Not going to be hit by any of this. Now we're gonna switch this around here a little bit. We're going to take some of that fluorescent. We are going to give it an assist. We're going to give it a little boost with our faux cadmium yellow here. A little bit of a boost. So in many ways, I don't want to say the entire focus of this is going to be the object source lighting, but it is just maybe not take up the entire time, but it's a big deal. To me, it's super important. Super important. We're going to, again, take some of that. Yeah, look at how it's, but it's always important. You can see how important it is to constantly get that excess paint off of your brush. You can see we're getting this. But now we'll have to keep going in with lighter and lighter colors. But we'll, you know what? Let's just play a little bit here. So this is one of our. So okay, look at. See how that says 111? I have some zeros that are the longer variety, or maybe I don't have one sitting around here. Maybe here we go. So this one's a 0, but it's also a very long brush. This is another difference, same size, but the 222 liner brush, spotter brush. And I'm just going to use this beat up spotter brush here. We are going to take a touch of our, tiny touch of our thinner there, because I need this to get down into some of these crevices here. To me, it should already start to be really changing how this looked from just a moment ago. I didn't think there was as many glowing figures. And there's a couple other ones that maybe don't have the glowing stuff on there. That's another little switch that I made. I said, okay, I can only do so many of these in a series and keep it reasonable. But if I actually, I just basically said, let's grab some of these and let's focus more on object source lighting, because that was really what I wanted to do with the army to begin with. You saw how much glowing stuff in the old Sisters of Battle army there is, and if you want to look at more of that, well, there you go. You can see that right there. It's talking about the blog. Go to the blog, check it out. It's there. You can watch it all right there. I want to say there has to be at least a good 50, 60 posts on the Sisters of Battle to check out there, and that's the old army. So here, I just want to get this caught up to where some of the other bases are. You notice I'm not really doing too much on the figure here. I'm really just kind of sticking to the base. can see how much lighter we're getting, and it is that combination of the cadmium, well, faux cadmium yellow, and our fluorescent paint here. I mean, that's looking toasty. At least, I don't know what it does to me. Looking toasty to me, and it'll get even brighter as we go along with this. All right, so now we're going to leave this one aside here. And here's another one. We got to do a similar thing. I kind of saved these two for last, right? The ones that had nothing going on here. On the base, nothing painted. So now we're back over here. We've got some of our faux cadmium red. We're going to start with this. We'll start off with this and just really grind this stuff in here. Now, maybe here it's on the figure itself, a little more gentle approach. Let's see how far that's going to extend on this base. You can see we're just all the brush strokes going this way. Everything's going this way. And you can see I have not gotten a lot of that on my hand. It's just, like I said, you can wear a glove. If you are really worried about it, just wear a glove. They're just, well, they're a little bit harder to get these days. I realize that. That was another reason why I had to get in the habit of not using a glove, is that there were none. I could not get any. And they're not exactly super common right now. Still, could be a while. Okay, I don't think we need to go up any higher there, but we need to get some of our, remember, our little broken bricks down here. We are now going to, again, do the same thing here. We're going to just, because look what it does. Not only does it get the excess paint out of here, but it does give us that nifty filbert shape. We will continue. Now we're going to take our fluorescent here, but we have to give it a little bit of help here with that faux cadmium. You notice we're not putting any of the liquid thinner into this. That is what's helping this to cover. What's also going to help it some more is, because we will be moving on to the other areas to get some of our initial golds and greens and that sort of thing. It is as much fun as object source lighting is, just in general, no matter what. Boy, it's especially fun with the oils. I mean, it really is so much fun with the oils. Again, I'm just going to wipe out that brush a bit. Go back in here. Once again, we're focusing. You can see how we're focusing in on the cadmium yellow light and our fluorescent together. And here I'm treating myself to a little bit more action on the figure. I just kind of wanted to. I know, well, we're going to swing back anyway. It's just sort of a, oh, what is it in Settlers and what's the other game? Rails, where it's switchback building, right? So the one who was last now is first. Well, consider her last and then first again, because the next thing we're going to do is go back to our other seraphim and start doing some of this on the seraphim. Now I am going to take, there's some thinner in this. I'm going to even hit some of that other cadmium. That's the cadmium yellow medium here. And I'm almost doing a little bit of a pin line wash here. Yeah. It's not just darker stuff. It's not just for dark colors. You can do it for lighter colors too. But the same principle applies. You place it and you leave it. Do not brush it and mess around with it and worry it. We place it and we leave it. We will have to do a similar thing on the oh, what is that? The backpack. And we're going to do a second segment on this here because it's such a vital thing. I don't want to shortchange this or this particular segment here, sir, or this what we're trying to do with this glow stuff. So yes, our next segment is going to be continuing this, although now it's going to be more or less on the figures themselves as opposed to the bases here, these extra ones that never got their initial. Yeah, look at that. This is a way you could do an entire army in object source lighting like this in a reasonable way. You can do anything if you got the time within reason. This helps to make it more within reason. And also, I'm not going to try and go all the way to the brightest light here at all. That's good enough. Good enough. Now, just look at, oh, actually, this is the one. This is the one with our last few minutes here. I want to get to this. Same thing is going to happen here. So this has to be. I don't think it's the only time I've ever pin washed something later, but it's got to be the first time I've done it in this mass quantity here. Very interesting to me. I am kind of fascinated by this. And I'm even going to use a smaller, thinner brush for that. I really want this. There's a certain thing I'm looking for this here. And we're just going to take something that is thinner. This is one of those Dick Blick. I did order some more of these. It's going to take days for them to get here. Now look what's going to happen. See that? See how it just flowed into there? And we're just going to do that. And here's just their last few minutes here. Look at that. Quite literally doing a pin line wash of this insanely bright. And it's not as bright as it's going to go either. It can be lighter than this. But I like the way it's going to actually do a little bit of mixing with the colors that we've got here. I have to say, this is a different approach than I would have taken even just, I want to say a couple of weeks ago. Things evolve, things change, your technique, well, at least it should. I know that's not something everybody wants to hear, but, well, especially if you're going to use a new medium, things are going to change. And there'll be times when you go back to your acrylic stuff and you're doing the same thing in acrylics. It may give you an idea for trying something with the oils too. You're constantly going to find, you know what, I wonder if this will work. And it may not work. You may try something and go, oof, well, that wasn't such a great idea. Better to have tried that than not to giving it a shot and just see maybe it could work. Pretty much the only person that's going to know it didn't work was you anyway. Is it really that big a deal? I mean, I know we're always our own worst critics and such, but there will not be a host of people just kind of standing there laughing at you like the kid from The Simpsons or something like that. Now, if this had been acrylics, I probably would have started out with this lighter color back in here and then gone over the top of it as it dried, which would have taken just maybe seconds for it to dry because, well, acrylics. This being oils, we are taking a different approach. And look at that. It has not taken long. We're going to go way brighter in there in a couple of spots, but we certainly need that to. It can't be quite so wet. Can't be quite so wet. We are going to go in here, though, a little bit, influence some of this. Okay, that's kind of neat. I mean, it's very rudimentary, very early, but this has been. I have to say, I've been enjoying this already, and it's every bit as. I mean, you can't tell. That's fluorescent acrylic. That's fluorescent oils. Can you tell? Nah, there's nobody gonna tell the difference. Nobody gonna tell the difference. But we are gonna make a difference in our additional object source lighting here in our next step as we continue with the oranges. Let's work in some of those lighter tones on the miniatures themselves here. And everything should be nice and caught up, and you can see we are going to focus greatly on our actual fluorescent here and our cadmium yellow, but you can see this, the minimal amount of paint. And this is pretty much faux cadmium, so that's what I mean. It's like it's a dry brush, but does it look like a dry brush on here? Oh, it is not. It is definitely not. Why? Because we've got layers of wet paint, sitting there, just waiting for us to tack on some additional color. And you can see, look at how that's picking up the other colors that are there. It's these are the things. If you're new to this, even if you're, I don't want to say a veteran or whatever of the oils, but you've tried them a couple of times, it's gonna be weird for you. It's gonna be different than acrylics and something you'll just have to get used to. I did. I had to get used to it. I still have to get used to this idea of just taking away as much of this as possible. Now, do I have to make a conscious decision or whatever every time? Well, not really, especially since I've constantly have to remind people because I'm mostly doing it in videos. So the reminder to remind you reminds me, if that makes any sense. I'm just looking at this. Again, it's not like this would be all that different of an approach with the acrylics, but still, I just never cease to be amazed what the oils can do. And I have to say that the fluorescent orange still has been kind of the champion of all of the fluorescent oil colors. You can, however, see what that support of the cadmiums, even when they're not the actual, genuine, real deal cadmium, you can see what that offers. Now, here's another deal, too. Let's say you paint your marble in acrylics. Well, then, look, you can take some of your fluorescent here and go over your marble, and you could wipe some of that away. So this is another potentially easier way of getting the look at how thin or translucent I can make this. That right there, not so easy to do with the acrylics. And you could look as I'm just barely dry brushing that on, but yeah, it's kind of giving an orange tint, right? More ideas. I just try to give you guys ideas. Look at the difference we've got here already. Look at that. No time at all. I'm completely fascinated at what this can do. Just to put the power of it, the potential of it. And you'll learn more every time you use these things. Some lessons will be harder than others. that's that's it. It's that way for me. I mean, heck, I've and just not painting wise, but just technology wise. I think I learned a very hard lesson recently between cameras and lighting and just computers in general. I've learned a ton of hard lessons with the 3D printing. And oh my gosh, now that I'm going to be using the FDM printer, it will be like learning how to print all over again. It'll be like I've never painted oils before. It's going to be that, I'm sure it'll be that traumatic for me. So I only bring these things up. I know it has nothing to do with getting these colors lighter, but I'm just trying to tell you this so that you are not quite so hard on yourself, and you give yourself the chance to learn, I suppose, maybe is where I'm going with this. Give yourself enough opportunity to look at that. Look what that's doing there. Again, the acrylic stuff could do a similar thing, but it just couldn't make it happen this fast. Unbelievable what that can do. Now let's not go all the way on this. We're gonna set this one aside. Now we're gonna go to this one, and you can see, look at the difference here between the two of them. We can still go lighter than this. However, we also want to get the other stuff going on here too, right? We don't want to just blow by that. Now I'm going to, you can see I'm kind of unifying thing. I'm going back in. That is stuff that was already painted with the acrylics, but I'm kind of hitting it with the oils. Again, the brush is dry as it can be. And I only do so much before I go back here. I get some fresh paint. It's important. It is really important, because all the while you are picking up paint that's already on there. It's darkening your brush, or darkening the color that's in your brush. Once again, I'm going to get some more. And this one's got a lot to do on it. There's a lot of stuff happening here. So many light sources. And is this all of the object source lighting? There's other places where it's going to have to just be done, I don't want to say in a more manual fashion, but a little bit tighter than what we can do here. This is still, remember, we want to, that's got to be in shadow mostly. We're still in that process of figuring out, okay, where exactly is the lighting supposed to be? Where is it supposed to be concentrated? Well, we know it's going to be concentrated up here. No doubt about that. We know it'll be focused there. Now, we gotta get some on her hair too. I almost forgot the hair. It's not gonna be too easy to get that brush down in there, but because it's oils, it will let us do a little bit of that. But look at this. Look at how much dirty junk got into that brush. It means we have got to just, I'm just wiping it with the paper towel and getting all the paint out of that brush. Well, most of the paint out of the brush. And I'm also going to get me a little bit more of my fluorescent orange out here. You will go through this a little bit faster, which is not unusual for even the acrylic fluorescent. I go through that faster. However, it's a really giant tube of it, so I'm not so worried about that. Even for as much object source lighting as I do, not so worried about going through that. Yep, I'm still going to get a little bit of my actual cadmium in here. I need a little bit of reinforcement here. I need that opacity, and there it goes. It gives me a little touch of that opacity back. Just needed some of that. Then we also need some here on her hair. I mean, this is definitely an OSHA hazard right here. I'm not quite so sure I'd want flames that close to my hair. And I actually have longer hair than she does. bit more of the fluorescent here. We need a little bit more on this whip in a couple of places, as you do here. There's just, I can tell you this, people will say, oh, you don't want to do object source lighting on a whole army, it'll take you forever. Cheating alert here, cheater alert. If I had more light sources on these, think of how much less time this whole freaking army would take. Look at how much we're getting done here just with a couple of colors, and look at how much the figure's getting painted. So I'm thinking that object source lighting actually a way to get armies done faster. It's another reason I kind of sneaky that way. I want to sneak in another little concept here. Again, some armies are maybe a little bit more about just focus strictly on the how-to or the, what would you say, just the technique or the material or something like that. And other series are more about concept and ideas or philosophies. And I'm hoping that this one is, well, it has enough of the other for you. I mean, obviously, you want to be able to learn some new things, but I am going to be talking about an awful lot of ideas and possibilities with this one. Because if all I do is just say, okay, look, here's the exact same technique that we did on series 12, and now we're just going to do that on series 15. It's just one guy's Lord of the Rings and the other guy was Song of Ice and Fire. It's not like it wouldn't be helpful. Of course it would be helpful. But just an endless series of, well, okay, we will do the same thing now on these guys is less helpful as far as I'm concerned. Okay, we're almost back around here to this one. Almost there. And then what we're going to have to, then it gets a little bit trickier because we've got to get lighter now. And some of the areas that we'll work in will be maybe a tad bit on the tighter side. All right, so that is, I'm going to say that's it for the larger brush. Now let's start to focus on some smaller areas here maybe. And we've got, so this one is a 0. It's that same Dick Blick. I don't think I meant to actually get another one of these. I kind of forgot when I did that. Well, I'll just have to do another one. So I'm going to go all the way back around here. I think this is one of the first ones that we grabbed here. So now we have to start to add a little bit of our thinner into this, believe it or not. I think to get this to flow some more and get it to stick, well, we'll find out. We'll find out as soon as we stick that on there. Boy, that's interesting. That cadmium orange just kind of dulled this all down. And yeah, that's starting to stick there. But what we're going to do here, instead of brushing it on to try and, what we're going to do, look at what's happening here. We're mostly just positioning that. Do that here. So we position it, get it in place. Now I'm going to have to just not unfortunately wipe that on my thumb like I'd like to, but okay. So it's in place. Then we wipe the paint off of that brush best as we can. And this is why there's really no layers with the oils. We're going to take this And now we're going to do our blending stuff to it. This is why the oils are more efficient, right? Because we're just taking paint and we're starting to move that around now. Hashtag new layers. We're not doing this in layers. All right, that's enough of that. Let's move on. Let's not get stuck in any one place here. I'm going to go even a little more with the lighter cadmium in there. And we've got dual light sources here. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just kind of positioning this, maybe a touch of the thinner to make it flow a little bit. And again, are we doing every last little bit of this lighter step? No, not doing every last little bit of it. A good portion of it. And I can still, even at this point, I can still do some of that kind of, it's a bit of a dry brushing kind of an action there. Paint's not dry, it's the brush stroke. It's that sort of scumbling brush stroke. So again, we're just going to position these here. It's almost like I'm just, I don't know, laying down some markers here or something like that. And then we'll go back. It's like I'm putting down flares and we'll go back and we'll mess with these things here. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. We're going to take the paint out of the brush here. Take that paint out of the brush. And then we blend. Yes, indeed. Will there be lighter highlights on this? There most certainly will. But this is as far as we are going to take this until we can get. Plus, we got some other figures now that got to get caught up to these. So, and those are the ones without the object source lighting on them. So we'll set her over to the side. Well, actually, first, I think you'll be able to see. Yeah, you can see. Look at that. You can see the difference there. Continue on here. This one is really going to be the important one here. And once again, we'll take just a little bit of. We're not making this real wet or anything like that. We are just gonna. I just want it to be able to flow. If it's not flowing, we gotta make it thinner. Then it flows, and we know we have made it thin enough. Going to grab some more. And it's why we work on multiple figures. It's why we work on all parts of the figure at once. All of this is designed to keep you from just kind of attacking the same area over and over again until it's just not going to take any more paint, or until you start getting those really choppy brush strokes. You won't want those either. You don't want choppy. But that is what will happen unless you kind of give again, you got to give that paint a little chance to set in place. Yeah, this one just, oh, that's where a helmet is. So what the heck is that thing over there? Oh, that's a helmet. Couple of brighter shots on her here. I'm just going to leave it. If I mess around with that, not going to be good. Not going to be good. Let's get our couple of lighter tones over here too. And up here, going back up here for, again, maybe even a little bit of that cadmium medium. And those are faux cadmiums. I just, I don't know. I may have to put that on the. I may have to make new labels for the faux cadmiums. Well, just so you know, I mean, for me, I would just kind of know anyway. But that might be something if I get the time. There's there's only so many hours I've got in the day for all of these different things, and there's some things I would really love to be able to do, like do some special label design type things and all that, and lots of other things. But sadly, until I get that longer day, like 52-hour day, that's my new petition. Yeah, that also needed to be lightened a bit. It's again just gonna, yeah, look at, okay, that's looking nice and toasty. All right, let's do our seraphim here. And I think this is about it because we pretty much hit the Repentia. Remember, that was our first one. Now we are giving that a little bit of a thinner look to it. And that's liquid thinning as opposed to just taking the paint out of the brush thinning. Yeah, yeah, a little more on the bottom edge of this cloth here. And again, the idea is to place it and then move it. So we're going to place that here. Not going to mess around too much with lighter stuff up there. Just, yeah, I want to see how the other areas play out first. That I just noticed something that would be in shadow instead. All right, colors placed. One last little round of blending here. Like this. And I have to keep that paper towel handy. If it wasn't for the cadmium there, I'd probably just squeeze it between my fingers and be done with it. But, see, hard to break habits. I can use one of the sponges too. And I do believe that is that. We will be doing much more to this, but we could be taking, I got to make sure I'm not taking this too far. Got to start getting some of our greens and other things. So that's gonna be our next thing. We're gonna try and establish some of the greens here in the armor, and the clothes, because not everything is necessarily gonna be gold on the armor stuff too. So next up is gonna be greens and gold, or just greens for sure, and we'll do that next. So among the other things that we want to take care of here is some of our greens. So we'll take kind of the same approach that we did with our object source lighting. We're going to find ourselves another one of these. We're going to take that permanent green light and mix that with some of our indigo here. So the indigo is just a really strong blue, but you can see there's just a little touch of that green in there. And away we go. Remember, keeping minimal amounts of paint in here. We're going to be doing the freehand down there, so I'm not even going to try and get the green all the way down there. Remember what we had before when we did the little pre-glaze and stuff? Well, see, look at that. Now we just have to kind of stick the brush in there, get a suggestion of it. We're also going to take a little bit of our green, and we're going to get that on some of these areas where there might be, well, something in the gold range. Again, it's important to keep minimal amounts of paint on this. So we're going to even scrape away some more. Yep, I'm going to scrape away even more of that. And we go back in. Going right back at making sure to have just a little bit of that green get onto the gold. That basically will be one of the final things that we do here in our episode 3 is to get in on that gold. And that is going to be just the placement of colors, very much like what we did with the optic source lighting. Not all that different like what we're doing right here. The Repentia, there's mostly just purity seals here. So minimal amounts of any sort. Well, we can, I think on this, it's not, it's an eviscerator. I think that's what this is called. We'll make this. I think that's what we did on the old Repentia. I actually painted several of those. Okay, I can remember the army that I tried to make, and this is when they were called witch hunters, way back in the day. Yeah, that was a long time ago. It's a long time ago. I think I had something like 20 of these. It was a huge, massive unit, and the idea was that they would just, since they, I believe, well, they never broke, fearless, whatever it was, but the idea was that they would actually kind of rage or whatever and then charge into the opposing army and just tie them up and let the other stuff advance. That didn't work at all. As in, not at all. So I can see here that this leg probably belonged on a different figure. Yeah, oh well. Unless I just skipped a piece here or something like that. I'm thinking, yeah, that leg must belong on a different seraphim. So another one's going to be looking for a leg, I guess. Oh well. I can't necessarily say that I'm super thrilled with the new, basically 48 millimeter approach to the assembly side of things. Not 48 millimeter, 148 scale, sorry. Assembly type thing. And if you've never assembled 148 scale model type stuff, you won't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, there's the way the parts just are arranged and how parts of the figure are like part of the face, part of the leg, part of the torso, part of the arm are all one piece. That's very much a 148 scale type of thing. Oh, look at this. Again, we're just slowly. Don't need a whole bunch of paint on that brush. Doesn't take very much. Look at that nice deep green that we got. And basically, at its core, is a super dark blue. Now, the seraphim here, they just don't have and as much of that green to deal with there. So, just look at grind that paint into that brush. Don't be shy. Now, obviously, where we've got the object source lighting, we do a little bit less with the green there. And the reason we're doing the green first is that I want the green in place so that when I put the gold on there, it has a chance to sort of mix with it a little bit instead of kind of the other way around where the green would just kind of cover the gold. I want the gold to go over the green, blend with it, and actually, I don't want to say hide the overflow areas or something like that, but I think you know what I mean. I think you get what I'm talking about. So again, look at this. We're just scumbling that green on there as opposed to painting it on. This is what's keeping this from being too overrun with paint. We also have, remember, we've got that deeper glaze in here too. So there's that going on as well, especially in all those recesses. And I think this is the last one that will have to do any kind of cloak or whatever. The last one is another one of the Rapentia, so not so much of the green there. And her sleeve, there's not a whole lot left to do with the. That is actually. No, I'm gonna say that's armor there. Sue, I think that's it with the green on her. We got one more left here. That's all. This is our Repentia. Okay, these can be green. Basically, her underwear can be green or whatever that is. She does have the some kind of a shirt on there. Not much else because everywhere else we've got some of our glow work in there. So the rest will go on to the eviscerator here. You can see I don't really care about covering up the teeth of the eviscerator. Doesn't matter to me. Now we'll just start to throw in a little bit more of this green here. Once again, it has to be just kind of ground in there. And we are, I don't want to say skipping a layer or something like that, but we're not quite, not like acrylics where you would just be very dainty in your next step up. In fact, we're going to enhance that. See how much lighter we are going here in this new layer because we've got wet paint there. Remember, it's sort of like a 3-for-1, and that's, look at this. It's like we skipped at least one whole layer, possibly even two. What we just did there, it's so simple. It really is. I see this and I go, why in the world? Well, there's reasons why I'd have to paint with the acrylics. It's still going to happen, but it just makes things like this so much easier. So much easier. But I go back, not just get fresh paint, but make sure there's not too much in that brush. You can see it's starting to give me that Kelly green there. It's starting to warm it up too. It's not just lightening it up, it's making it warmer. That using that indigo blue there, it kept it nice and dark. But also gave me a good base for these warmer greens to go over the top. Once again, going with that warmer green. There we go. Now, this is a little bit of a different series because for the most part, the bases are pretty much painted. There's no flock that's going to happen here. There's no foliage or anything like that. So these will really, all of these episodes are just really going to focus in on just the painting side of things, less on the basing. And I think that's, yeah, that's it for that one. I'll just, can't we keep going back here to get not just fresh paint, but also make sure it is some of it taken out of the brush. That's that's about all I can do there. Now here maybe, see, I just a little hint of green right there. Let's see what happens with this Repentia here. I can't look at that. Makes that whole light to dark thing just such an easy transition. Now, this may not be the ideal. If you are just starting with oils, I'm not quite so sure this is the very first thing you want to tackle. I would say, again, something that's simpler, something that maybe just has very big, big, broad cloaks, maybe just some Reaper figures. Heck, mess around with some Reaper Bones miniatures. If you got those, they're cheap, they're plentiful, and an awful lot of them, since they are supposed to be sort of D&D-ish type characters, they got cloaks. They have cloaks galore. Just practice on some of those. Even if it's not, if you don't feel like you've mastered oils, but then when you go back around to these, you'll have a little better sense of what can happen with them, and maybe then you have more success on the figures where you really do want things to go exactly, well, as close to plan as you possibly can get. Now, nothing's ever going to go completely to plan. That's not quite how the universe works. Once again, with the not just lighter green, warmer green. Have to keep constantly going back. Now, after this, I'm going to just finish out these last couple. I've got to go in here, and I do actually have to get all of this paint out of the brush. Well, as much as possible via the paper towel, not via washing this. That's another thing that I guess I kind of got away from that myself a while ago. But just again, watching other people, it has reminded me how much essentially drier I have gone with the paints. And again, that's watching other people, getting to see what they're doing. And I said, okay, yeah, we need to let people know what's going on. They need to have less paint in that brush. It needs to just be drier applications. And I think things might go just a wee bit better, a little more smooth, literally and figuratively. And that's like levels of pun. There are layers of pun on that one. There are several layers of pun. Now, before I get to that brightest green, there is a base where I would like to have this one. Yep. It's not like I'm going to really paint marble over here. I just at least want to give it a touch of green. And see, look at it. It's taking in, because we did that little pre-glaze right there. Now, I'm curious. This is going to be fun. We got, look at this little demarcation line here. We don't necessarily need quite so much object source lighting on it, but look at that. Oh, man. Look at that. Man, unbelievable. How cool is that? But I'm only going to get one more shot, and that's it. Not going to mess with it anymore. Look at that. Look at that nice little blend right there. Here, it's going to be tough for you to see. But even that, oh, so much easier than the acrylic. We're literally blending a Kelly green into fluorescent orange and getting a very nice blend out of that. However, you saw how it's a little bit and then stop. A couple of brush strokes, maybe get some fresh paint. That's it. No more. No more than that. We'll get some green here because we know our golds are going to go there. Now, as I said, we are going to go in here. Look at how much paint was in there. Look at all that. Look how wet that is. You thought that was a dry application? Look at this. And I'm pressing this as hard as I can. Look at how much. There's still paint in here. There's still a little paint getting on that paper towel. However, though, I do have a really super nifty. Look at that. Look at that filbert brush. They don't sell you those in the store. Now, this is going to be pretty much this bright, just permanent green light. That is in that, well, relatively cheap set. Me of the $28 variety. And now we go in, and this is where we're going to get, again, some of that free blending. Free blending. But wait, there's even more. Now, what do I mean by the free blending? What I mean is that instead of having to paint a layer of green, we circumvented that. We kind of shot ahead and went maybe 2.5 layers instead of just one, because of, well, that's the advantage of having, even if we didn't have the wet paint there, we could still do a cheaty thing like that. We still could. So I'm going to take care of the ones that have the least amount here first. The least amount of green to deal with. Get not worried about that green getting elsewhere on the eviscerator, because we will be hitting our metals. That might be something that we do to start off the next episode of this. Because again, without the basis to paint or flock or anything like that, it just gives me a little extra time to dive into the painting. And I will just hit a few spots of that with the lighter stuff. So everything else now is all cloaks. And once again, dry application here, as dry as we can make it. With the flattened out brush, and I actually can get away with a little bit of that because there's no cadmiums or anything like that in here. A nice rich Kelly green, and we only used one color of green. And there will probably be additional highlights to that, but that's not going to happen now, because remember, in our next, kind of the last segment here, we are going to do our same thing like we did here with the green. We will do that with the golds. And if you're wondering why I'm just kind of, okay, well, there's stuff like the skin and the hair. Why is that not being done in this first one here? Because I'd like to be able to film the next video with this stuff still wet, instead of it, all of a sudden there's a delay of a day or so and it's all dried, or it's mostly dried. I want even the next episode here. So I need to compress the time in between them. And the last few here. I look at this, and it's not like the green was really hard to blend necessarily with the acrylics, but there were a lot of layers that need to be painted. I mean, heck, you can go see. I think that was the other reason why I was okay in doing this one in oils, or this series in oils, because you do have that other sister, the individual one, painted in acrylics, same color scheme, exactly same color scheme. So I thought this would be another kind of layer of coverage for you right here. So you kind of like the dark sword stuff, where we did the same figure, one in acrylic, one in oils, or reversing. First one was oils, the next one was acrylics. So you could see what the difference was. I will need to maybe do that again with one of the dark sword figures, because of how much the oils have changed, and the acrylics too, for that matter. I turned around here and went, oh, object source lighting, don't have to hit that side. Once again, saving the time. Don't, if you had a whole army where everything's glowing, or being object source lit, saves you time. Could be an army that gets painted faster instead of the opposite. Very much the opposite. Oh, we got, yeah, that's not really, that's a chain sword there. It's not an eviscerator. I think she's the only one that has one. Yes. I still got, look at this. I can just grab a little bit of the indigo here. And there, no harm done. Can still blend that here. And away we go. One last little go round here with some of our lighter green. Again, have you seen me add any thinner to this? Nope, none whatsoever. That is some of the difference. This is we're painting thin, but not wet. It's a dry, kind of thin. Oh, and I just will never be forgiven for that one. But that's how it goes. Straight up green. Like I said, we will add probably either yellow ochre to this to get it to that final light stage, or something like maybe a touch of titanium white in there too. But yeah, look at, see all the nice rich little smooth blends in there. Okay, quick little preview here. Let's just try it with a little touch of titanium white. I'm thinking that's going to be too, yeah, that's a little too pale right there. So we'll give you a little preview into, let's get a little bit of our yellow ochre out here. If anything, the whole idea is to keep it from getting too, okay. So a touch of a preview. And you know what? Maybe I can just hit this on some of the cloak here. See, look at that. Just a quick little swipe there. Quickie little swipe. Since these are just going to be a matter of literally one brush stroke and leave it, I think we can do that. We can absorb this in our last few minutes here. But again, see how it was one stroke? Decision over precision. We decide to just, boom, do that and leave it. One brush stroke, leave it. Now there I'm going to take advantage of a little bit of a blend. Just going to throw a little bit of green there, maybe get some light. And look at that. Again, that's a shadow area blend there. So one last little thing here where we add some lightness to it. Okay, a little of the white, again, the yellow ochre, to keep it from getting too, shall we say, grayed down. And everywhere else is already, yeah, don't need to worry about that. Eviscerator with just a slight touch of that lighter green. Not a dry brush. Bit here on this seraphim. And that's it. So next up we'll hit our golds, and that'll be pretty much one of the final things that we do in episode 3. So we'll be right back with our golds. Let's get to those golds like we were talking about. And the seraphim especially, I think they're just going to have a lot more of it. We'll keep this pretty simple. We are going to start out with some of that's the yellow ochre there. We're going to make sure we have a little bit of our cadmium yellows on him. We're just going to start out this way. Actually, it's going to have a little bit of a greenish tint to it. And as always, gentle brush stroke, working with what's already there. You can see, look, that pre-wash there still is active enough. But this is going to give us a nice, that almost greenish type of a base. Then we can put those lighter, say more yellowish, more orange colors on there. We also want to have a little bit of, see if we can't sneak a little bit of purple into some of these golds as well. And I this, okay, so this, yeah, this should be gold. I think if I remember from the color test, that should also be gold. If there's a little bit of overflow, that is not a big deal. I think the seraphim pretty much for the most part have the most armor that's going to be showing. And just going over here, getting a little bit of that faux cadmium yellow deep. And we talked about the difference between that, say, and the, you can see a little bit of the green working its way in the armor now that we're finally starting to get some of our golds on here. And maybe in some case we'll take just a touch of the cadmium yellow light. And also not thinking in terms of layers, we're thinking more in terms of just place a color, push a color. It's not going to be like acrylic paints. It's going to be very different. Here, let's get a little bit of just a touch of our thinner in there. And we can go in with more precision with smaller brushes. We're just trying to lay this out here. Okay, that's going to be a glove. As much as anything else, I'm getting myself familiar with these. So here's our other seraphim. The two Repentia, I think most of anything that's gold on them is pretty much going to be in, say, the handles of the eviscerators and that sort of thing. So this is why I didn't mind having some of that green overlap a bit when we were painting that in the last segment, because now it starts to mix with the gold colors that are going in here. This is that pre-glaze that we did. It's still active enough. It's, yeah, I can see as I put the brush back onto the palette there to get some fresh paint, I can see it is mixing in there. So it's having an impact. Now we'll continue with the gold over here on whatever that is. And then we'll also, there's going to be some form of gray. I don't think we'll do any kind of, yeah, we'll just do some kind of a grayish type color, something bluish gray, so that the fiery glow stands out a little bit. All right, gold over here on that shoulder. And remember, just thinking about, this is facing up towards the sky, so it's not going to get any of our fiery glow. I'm going to hit this one a little bit more. And now on to the rest of our sisters here. So bolter casings there, we won't mess with those. That, I think we're going to stick with our darker color on that too. I just had to realize, oh, since this, no, there's no glowy stuff on this. Okay. And again, if I see too much paint on that brush, I will take some of that off of there. We can still, if I even feel the need, I could even do one of those darker glazes over the top of that. Just trying to pick up enough of that, a little bit of that cadmium yellow light. And again, that's going to have all kinds of green reflecting all over that armor in there, if you can even see it. So using that kind of semi-dry brush. See, I don't even mind if, okay, a little bit of our fluorescent orange works its way in there. Not a big deal because we have plenty. See, we have plenty of that existing pre-glazed color on there. That tones that down. The most important thing is to make sure you've got less paint sitting on that brush. Can't emphasize that enough. I really do think that's the bugaboo that's getting a lot of folks, is that there is just way too much paint on their brushes. And it doesn't, you can see how little it takes to all of a sudden go, wow, that's quite the landslide of paint there on that brush. It takes very little to go from, well, that should work, to, oh my gosh, that's too much. And we've just got a couple more of these to go. Then we can start to think about lightening up just a bit. And stuff like the hair, well, that is obviously just going to be that same, I'm thinking mostly Terra Rosa in there. See here, yes, it's got to get some gold in there, but it has to still be dark. Otherwise, then we're going to lose all of our, it needs to look like a shadow because that's what makes our lighting stand out. So anything, no gold there. This one, there's so much of the lighting on it, we're not really going to see a whole lot of the gold. Not going to be a ton of it here, because we got light sources coming from all different directions. Technically 4 light sources on that. Plus the green of the robe. So yeah, you won't be seeing a whole lot of gold here on this. Maybe just a hint of it over here. And this is, see, we're going with that filbert brush. Lets us do so many different things. And again, here the intention is to have this mix a bit with the underlying, that pre-glaze that we put. You can see when I put the brush into that lighter color, you can see how much of that other color it's picked up. And at this point, that's actually something that I want to see happening. Anything else? Okay, just we got some over here. Some over here. Stuff like the pouches and strap. Those are things that we are going to start to take care of in the next episode. Again, working with the oils, a little bit different. This, even just the sisters here, this is making me do things a little bit different than, let's say, if this was all just more skin tone, if it was not armor based like this. And then, of course, you have all the object source lighting, and that really changed some things too. So we're going to have our last bit of, yeah, we'll just do some of that gold stuff here. On these, it's just an indication at this point. Not quite sure what I want to do with the teeth on these. I'll just hit them with that gold, and I think that is about it on that one. And now on this one, we'll hit these chains. It's still really neat to be able to essentially do tantamount to a dry brush and yet have blending that's like wet blending. It is almost, you do a dry brush, you get a wet blend. We've mentioned that a couple of times or several times already, but it's pretty fascinating. And it is interesting to see what remains the same on these new plastic versions versus the older metal ones. I think that the biggest changes to the Repentia, obviously, the sisters in the armor, well, you can only do so much with that. I suppose if you wanted to keep them looking close enough to the old ones. Okay, we'll set that one aside, and now let's see if we can start to do some lighter things here. And we've got our white over here. We have some of our cadmium yellow here, and once again, it's going to be important to see how we're going to... I don't necessarily like to use the term skip a layer or two, but you see how we've gone pretty light here compared to what that original was. And once again, we got to keep that dry. Now we will have to constantly go back here and get some of the fresher color, no doubt about it. Here, let's get some more of that cadmium yellow in here. Important to have the brush in a filbert shape. Once again, it is just like a bit of a dry brush. You can see it's already starting to pick some of the other stuff up, so I'm going to go back there, get some couple of brush strokes. We leave it. Couple of brush strokes. And also, once again, just leave it. And we'll get the rest of our... Yep, rest of the armor here. Some of these backpacks. Gotta keep constantly going back here. Sometimes even adding more of the weight to it to make sure it's not going to get too dingy. And let's see, let's hit this here. What about... so here, just going to get a little bit on that edge, and that's it. And I think that's about it. Yeah, there's... but this is another area where the oils provide the time saving. Because if this was acrylic, we certainly wouldn't have gone this light this fast, but it's pretty clear that it is blending with previous layers. It's, it's the not something that I realized right away at all. Actually, this is more of a recent thing, and I don't mean like last week recent, but it definitely was not something I thought I could do straight away. Your mentality, well, you're just so used to the acrylic mindset where it's all about layering. And I mean, you can do it with oils. It's not like you can't do it. It's more like, why would you do it? Why would you not take advantage of, like I said, those time savings? It's a way to really save a bunch of time. It's meant to blend anyway. Why not blend it? And of course, you can, you are, even if you go in that more compressed form of, well, okay, here's a layer and then another layer. I mean, you can still wet blend those too, but that really does not take full advantage of what's possible with the oils. And so I just have to keep constantly going back here because we can still do, and I'm pretty sure I did it on our color test one, maybe some orange, some kind of glaze in there that maybe brings a little bit more orange or something back into the armor. We can certainly do that. Here I'm going to take advantage of that filbert shape again. And then last but not least, we got our two seraphim over here. And hit this back here. You can see the angle of the brush too. It's not just designed to pick up an edge, it's also, you see how I'm getting blending on each of these. If I was doing it this way, see, that's more of a, see how that smooths it out, but going across the grain like that, that actually let me get some color placement as opposed to just the color blending. Gotta figure out with this sorter, just if we're gonna really do much of a glow on that, I could maybe even make it an orangey glow. But that's something we'll figure out in the next episode. Here I'm gonna actually put the lighter tone in the middle of this. Again, gonna make sure that I've got enough yellow in here. But we don't want these to be Imperial Fist sisters. We want them to have some gold on them. We also have to think about some plasma glow there. So I think when I did the original sisters, the swords maybe had a greenish glow to them. But that plasma pistol thing, I think that's another that we will we'll take that on in the next episode. Since I don't have to deal with any kind of flock or anything like that on the base, it really saves a ton of time. If you remember the Lizard Man Blood Bowl team, holy smokes, that was pretty crazy. There was all kinds of stuff going on with those bases. It wasn't just foliage, it was all of the texture roller stuff. You also had the little statue pieces. Okay. Hit that with some brighter stuff. Let's Yep, let's get that. And tops of these. Once again, you can see I'm going to kind of cross the grain with that to start with. And then I'm going to go this way, and that sort of blends it, takes away some of the brush stroke. And there may be some other changes color-wise to this as well. Remember, we've got the little glowy things there, and I'm definitely going to break out, I think, the cobalt blue for that, because that was really, I loved the intensity of that. Yeah, well, I'm just going to get a little bit here, and then we've got our couple of Repentia here. We'll get the lighter yellows on them too. Yeah, I see there's purity seals going on there. You know, I actually don't mind the gold there and the eviscerator blades. I think the other thing I might try too is maybe we'll do some blood spatter on those now that I'm thinking about it. So that is something you might see. That could be a fun thing. Where's our other one? Here she is. Again, keeping this as dry as possible. Looks like a dry brush, not a dry brush. I'm not quite sure what these are. Right here. This it's almost like a sort of a cage type of a thing. Not quite sure exactly what's going on there. Now let's get the last bit of our lights on this here. Obviously, we'll hit these with some skin tones in the next episode. Okay, I see there's a little bit of that sort of a cage thing going on over there. You know, actually, what I might do is just a real quick segment on these two statue pieces here to get the bases all caught up. So I think there will be just one last segment. It'll be brief. Might not even be 10 minutes long. Just want to get these two statues on the two Repentia, or the one Repentia here and the other Seraphim. So yeah, okay, that's what we're gonna do. So we're good to go here. At least enough with these golds. I'm even gonna just take it and let it mix with the pre-glaze there. Okay, good enough there. So what we will do just in our last little segment is take care of these two. I want to do that while this is still kind of fresh in my mind here and get some of the marble color there while we're still working with our greens. And we'll just do that last little conclusion next. Let's take care of these two bases really quick here. And that's going to be something along the lines of this. We're going to take some of our indigo blue here. We'll let that mix with this titanium white. Maybe even just a touch of that red to make sure it gets to be not quite so greenish. It is also, once again, very, very dry. See how much lighter that looks on here? And I think, yeah, oh, that is some extra sculpey stuff that we threw in there. And if this looks too much like a dry brush, I can always go in with something else here and really scrub that in and fill in some of those textures. But I would like to get a little bit of the greenish marble in that too. So let's get our other one. So even this still has a little bit of a greenish touch to it. That is fine. It's mostly just going to visually sort of pass as gray. Some more of our white here again, keeping that as dry as I can. And then look at the smooth blends. You wouldn't think this would happen at all, as in at all, but it just does. That's been the big discovery, at least of the last month, I would say. A really surprise discovery. Because you do, your brain just logically says, okay, well, we're going to be blending here. We're going to have plenty of wet oil paint, and it's going to be all wet and wet and wet. And we're like, ooh, that's actually too much of the wet. Now, here's another quick little sort of preview thing. Okay, we can take this kind of a grayish tone here, and I can just start hitting on our bolt pistols, because this is going to be, and that's how we're going to approach these things. We're going to just hit them lighter like this, and then we'll take some glazes over the top of those, and that'll mostly with, say, Payne's Gray, Indigo, that sort of thing. That will be the plan on those guys. I'm just going to find another one here. Well, that's our plasma pistol, but I am also going to lighten that up a little bit. Same here. Same here. Look at, all I'm trying to do is catch a few edges there, and then we will let the glazing take over the rest of the heck. I think that, you know what, I'm just going to do all of these, because why not? Again, what's going to happen as we're working on things like the plasma and the hair and those things, we will be hitting the glaze on these, and what that's going to do is it'll get down to all those little crevices, give us some color in there that we can work off of. Then we let that sit for a while, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, as we do another segment or other stuff. See, like right here, some of those rocks could just use a little bit more. I have that color, why not use it? Why not just use the color while it's there? So where's our, here we go. And now we'll go just at, this is going to get a little bit more wet. Okay, there was a little bit of our thinner slash spirits mixed in with that. Just enough to make it flow and blend. Just enough. And then let's take our green here. And by green, I mean our, what was that, the permanent green light? Yeah, it's permanent green light. A little bit of our indigo. a suggestion of some green here. That's all. Just a suggestion of it. And this is what I mean about even oils that are, let's say this was already dry underneath there. You can still do some serious blending of oils, even wet here, or even when it's dry. We're going to take our bit of a blending brush and we'll just scumble that. That nifty blend we just got there. And that was dry oil over basically mostly dry paint. We could even, if we wanted to, do a couple of quick impressions of our marble here. And I mean impressions, not anywhere near as what we did on the other bases. Just see, it's a little indication of some kind of some veins in the marble. That's all it really takes there. That's it. And what we want to do is we're going to take, oh good, we have some raw umber here. What we're going to do a little bit of a glaze on these statue pieces here. So it's umber, maybe a touch of our blue, the indigo blue there. And once again, it is just touch it to the figure. Don't necessarily paint it on. I know that's the big temptation, is to paint that on. But we want to let it flow into crevices on its own. But it can still be blended a bit. Look at that. See, we're just going to take some of that glaze and we'll push that around here. Gives it a little more shadow here, especially over here, because we want that fire to be doing something. So we throw that glaze out there and then we just push it around a little bit. Look at that, see, right there. Now I feel like we've got some shadows working there. Didn't really feel like we had much in the way of shadows on that. We also we'll be working more with the object source lighting as well. But that's something once again, we didn't want to get too far out ahead of ourselves with that. Just going to drop a little bit of a glaze in there and then we'll move this around. See, look at how we can blend that glaze, make it part of it. And just a couple of last little glazes here. Good enough. Again, that was mostly umber, a little bit of our blue mixed in. Now we've got some separation with our foot there from the rest of the base. I think I'll do the same on this side now. And that's good to go now. So I just want to say thanks to everybody that has supported not just the army painting level, but all the other pledge levels too, the Dark Sword, even the 5, even the 1. I mean, if that's all you've been able to do, every last bit matters. It's been very important. And I always try to come up with just something new and different for you in each series, every episode. And here we go. We are all set now. We're not going to let these dry. We are going to basically begin filming the next episode pretty much as soon as I can transfer the footage from this episode, which means I will be seeing you guys on episode 4. And thanks again, everybody.